The alarms did not wake me. The silence did. 1 second the station hummed with the low buzz of engines and voices, and the next second everything stopped. No engines, no chatter, just my own breath, loud in my ears, and a red light blinking above the door of my quarters. I sat up so fast my head spun. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. My name is Daniel Cole. 3 days ago, I was a junior engineer on a research platform called Meridian, floating quietly above Earth, running tests on old satellite systems nobody cared about. Today I was standing in the dark, barefoot, staring at a blinking light that meant only one thing. Intruder alert. I grabbed my boots and ran into the corridor. Other doors were opening too. Grace Bennett, one of the system's analysts, stumbled out with her hair a mess and fear written plainly across her face. "Daniel, what is happening?" she asked. "The main computer just shut down every non-essential system on the station, even the coffee makers." I almost laughed. Almost. Then the whole station shook, gently, like something massive had brushed past us in the dark. We ran to the observation deck. What I saw there changed everything. Outside the reinforced glass, hanging silently in the black of space, was a ship, not one of ours. It was easily 10 times the size of anything humanity had ever built, shaped like a curved blade, dark metal catching starlight in strange patterns. Dozens of smaller ships floated around it like a swarm of silent insects. "That is not possible," Grace whispered. "Nothing gets past our early warning systems. Nothing." But it had. A voice came through every speaker on the station at once, calm and cold, speaking perfect English, with no accent at all. "People of Earth, we are the Solvane Dominion. Your species has been judged unstable and dangerous to the order of known space. You have 1 rotation of your planet to accept terms of surrender. Resistance will not be tolerated." Then silence again. Grace grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt. "Daniel, they are talking about surrender. Surrender of what? Our planet." I did not answer, because I did not know. None of us knew. We had spent decades searching the stars, sending signals, hoping for contact, dreaming of meeting someone else out there. And now someone else had come, and their first words to us were a threat. Within an hour, every screen on the station lit up with the same message repeating on every channel Earth used to communicate. Governments scrambled. News networks tried to explain something they did not understand. I watched my own reflection in the dark glass of the observation deck, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly small. The Solvane ship did not fire. Not yet. Instead, 3 hours later, it demonstrated its power a different way. A beam of white light, thin as a needle, shot down toward the moon. We watched, frozen, as an entire section of the lunar surface simply vanished, replaced by a smoking crater the size of a small country. Grace covered her mouth with both hands. Somebody behind me was crying. That was not war. That was a warning, a promise. They wanted us to understand exactly what they were capable of, without actually attacking us yet. It worked. Fear spread across Earth like wildfire. I did not sleep that night. None of us did. Instead, our small crew gathered in the mess hall, drinking cold coffee, trying to make sense of numbers and data streams pulled from every sensor on the station. Ethan Brooks, our communications officer, kept replaying the alien message over and over, searching for hidden meaning, some clue, some weakness. "They call us unstable," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Dangerous. Based on what? We have never even left our own solar system properly. How can they already know enough about us to judge us?" "Maybe they have been watching for a long time," said Nathan Price, an older engineer with gray hair and tired eyes. "Maybe longer than any of us want to imagine." The thought made my skin crawl. Watched, studied, measured, and found wanting. By morning, Earth's governments had gathered for an emergency summit, broadcast to every screen on the planet. I watched from the station, along with the rest of the crew, as leaders from different nations stood together, something that almost never happened without conflict. Some voices called for surrender immediately. Why fight something that could erase the moon in seconds? Others refused, saying no threat, however powerful, had the right to demand submission from an entire species without cause. The debate raged for hours. Meanwhile, the Solvane fleet grew larger. More ships arrived, spreading out in careful formation above our cities, our oceans, our mountains. It looked less like a warning now, and more like a noose slowly tightening. I remember standing at the window with Grace beside me, both of us silent, watching the ships gather. "Do you think we can win?" she asked quietly. I did not have an answer. Winning against something that could erase a piece of the moon in a heartbeat seemed impossible, but something inside me refused to accept surrender either. Call it stubbornness. Call it fear turned into anger. I did not know the word for it yet, but I would learn it soon enough. That evening, Earth's leaders gave their answer. They refused to surrender. The Solvane response was immediate and brutal in a different way than I expected. Instead of full-scale attack, 3 of their smaller ships descended and struck key locations, communication towers, a shipyard under construction, and one of our oldest surviving space stations, older than Meridian, evacuated just hours before. The strikes were precise, almost surgical, designed to cripple our ability to fight back without wiping out millions of lives at once. It was not mercy, it was strategy. They wanted our surrender, not our extinction, not yet. Our station received emergency orders within the hour. Meridian was to be evacuated of non-essential personnel and converted into a coordination point for what remained of Earth's defense fleet, a fleet that, compared to the Dominion's ships, looked like toys. I was given a choice: leave with the civilians heading to underground shelters, or stay and help repurpose the station's systems for whatever resistance Earth could manage. Grace made her choice before I did. "I am staying," she said, jaw tight, eyes steady despite the fear I knew she still felt. I did not spend 10 years learning these systems to run and hide now. I thought of my family back on the surface, my sister Claire in particular, a teacher who had spent her whole life believing that reason and calm could solve any problem. I thought about what would happen to people like her if we simply gave up. "I am staying too," I said. Over the next 2 days, Meridian transformed from a quiet research station into something closer to a command center. Engineers, scientists, even a handful of surviving military personnel gathered aboard, trying to build something out of nothing. We had no ships capable of matching the Dominion's fleet. What we had was knowledge, desperation, and an unwillingness to simply lie down. Ethan managed to intercept fragments of Dominion communication, mostly encrypted, but occasionally a piece slipped through untranslated. Patterns began to emerge. Rigid patterns. Predictable patterns. Their fleet moved with precision, yes, but also with a kind of stiffness, as if every ship followed the exact same rulebook without deviation. "They are disciplined," Nathan observed, staring at the data. "But disciplined can also mean predictable, and predictable can be used against you." It was the first real spark of hope I had felt since the ships arrived. On the 3rd day, something happened that none of us expected. A single small Dominion vessel broke away from the main fleet, drifting toward Meridian, transmitting a signal on an unprotected frequency, almost too simple to be a trick. The message, translated roughly by our systems, contained only a few words: requesting contact, not hostile, seeking asylum. The mess hall fell into stunned silence when Ethan read it aloud. Grace looked at me, eyes wide. "Asylum," she repeated. "One of them wants asylum. From their own fleet." Nobody knew what to make of it. Was it a trap? A trick to gain access to our systems, our location, our defenses? Or was it something else entirely? A crack in the wall we thought was solid stone? We debated for hours. In the end, curiosity and desperation won over caution. We could not afford to ignore any possible advantage, however small or strange. I remember standing in the docking bay as the small vessel approached, my heart hammering against my ribs, unsure whether we were about to make first contact with an ally or invite disaster directly into our home. The airlock hissed open. What stepped through was unlike anything I had imagined: taller than any of us, with skin the color of weathered stone and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of exhaustion. It moved carefully, hands raised in what I could only assume was a universal gesture of peace. It spoke slowly, testing unfamiliar words. "I am called Vec," it said. "I serve the Dominion as a systems architect. I no longer wish to serve a cause I believe to be wrong." Grace stepped forward before any of us could stop her. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, voice steady despite the tension in the room. Vec studied her for a long moment before answering. "Because," it said quietly, "your species reminds the Dominion of something they fear more than war. And I would rather see that fear proven right than watch another world crushed for no true reason." None of us understood exactly what that meant yet, but in that moment, standing in a docking bay far above a planet under threat of destruction, I realized something important. The Dominion had come expecting quick surrender, easy victory, a lesson taught and lesson learned. Instead, they had triggered something they clearly had not planned for: doubt, resistance, and now, defection from within their own ranks. Whatever the Dominion believed about humanity being unstable and dangerous, they were about to discover that pressure applied in the wrong way does not always break things. Sometimes it forges them into something far stronger and far more dangerous to the ones applying the pressure than anyone expected. As Vec was led carefully toward a secure section of the station for questioning, I stood alone for a moment at the window, watching the distant shapes of Dominion ships hanging silently above our world. They wanted us to fear them, and we did. But fear, I was learning quickly, is not the same as surrender. And the Dominion had just given us our first real piece of hope, without even realizing it. Little did they know, that single act of one soldier choosing conscience over obedience would become the first crack in a wall that, given enough time and enough pressure, was about to come crashing down entirely, not on us, but on the very empire that built it. Vec sat across from us in a small conference room that had once been used for budget meetings and equipment reviews. Now it held something far stranger, an alien willing to betray its own people, and a handful of humans desperate enough to listen. Nathan led the questioning, his engineer's mind cutting straight through fear toward useful information. "Tell us about their ships," he said. "Weapons, shields, propulsion, anything you know." Vec's long fingers rested on the table, still unfamiliar with human furniture. "The Dominion fleet operates on a strict command structure. Every ship follows orders from a central authority without deviation. This makes them powerful in coordinated assault, but slow to adapt when circumstances change unexpectedly." Ethan leaned forward. "Slow to adapt how?" "Decisions must pass through several layers of command before action is taken," Vec explained. "A junior officer cannot act without approval, even in moments requiring immediate response. This has never mattered before, because no species the Dominion has encountered adapted quickly enough to exploit the delay." Grace and I exchanged a glance. It was the first real weakness we had heard, buried inside an unfamiliar accent and careful, testing English. "And weapons?" Nathan pressed. Vec described systems that sounded impossible to counter directly: energy weapons capable of vaporizing solid rock, shields that could absorb tremendous impact. But as the description continued, a pattern emerged, one Nathan noticed immediately. "These shields," he said, "they are designed to stop concentrated force, a single powerful strike." "Correct," Vec said. "What about many small strikes? Distributed damage, arriving from multiple directions at once, timed together." Vec paused, considering the question carefully. "The shields recalculate protection based on the largest detected threat. Multiple smaller threats, arriving simultaneously from different vectors, have never been tested against Dominion defenses. No species has possessed the technology or the willingness to attempt such a strategy." The room went quiet. I felt something shift inside me, a spark of possibility where only despair had existed hours before. "We do not have their technology," Grace said slowly, "but we might have something else. Improvisation. We have spent decades building systems out of limited resources, working around problems instead of through them. Over the following days, Meridian became a hive of frantic activity. Every engineer, scientist, and technician still aboard threw themselves into a single goal, finding a way to strike the Dominion where their rigid systems could not adapt quickly enough to respond. Vec proved invaluable, translating fragments of technology recovered from a damaged Dominion scout ship that had been quietly monitoring Earth before the invasion began. Working alongside human engineers, adjustments were made that no textbook, no manual, no previous encounter had ever documented. I found myself working alongside Vec more than anyone else, our shared task requiring long hours studying alien circuitry beside a being who, only days earlier, I would have called an enemy without hesitation. "Why did you really leave them?" I asked one night, the two of us alone in the workshop, surrounded by disassembled components and half-finished modifications. Vec was quiet for a long moment. The Dominion believes stability requires control. Every species they encounter is measured against a single standard: obedience, predictability. Those who resist are labeled dangerous and dealt with accordingly. And humanity? Humanity does not fit neatly into their measurements, Vec said. You argue among yourselves, yet unite when threatened. You break rules, yet build new ones quickly when the old ones fail. The Dominion sees this as instability. I have come to believe it is something else entirely. Adaptability, a trait my people lost long ago, buried beneath generations of rigid control. I did not know how to respond to that, so I simply kept working, turning the words over in my mind long after Vec had returned to rest. Meanwhile, Earth's surface faced growing pressure. The Dominion had not launched a full invasion yet, but smaller strikes continued, each one calculated to demonstrate strength without triggering complete destruction. Cities were evacuated, underground shelters filled beyond capacity. My sister Claire sent a brief message through what remained of civilian communication channels, her voice shaking but resolute. "We are safe for now," she said. "But Daniel, everyone down here is terrified. Please, if there is anything you can do up there, do it soon." I listened to that message more times than I could count, using it as fuel during the exhausting hours spent modifying alien technology into something we could actually use. 10 days after first contact, our plan was ready, at least ready enough to attempt. A single Dominion supply relay orbited quietly at the edge of the system, lightly defended compared to the main fleet, responsible for coordinating resupply and communication between Dominion vessels. Destroying it would not win the war, but it would prove something important, that the Dominion was not untouchable. Grace ran the final calculations while Ethan monitored communication patterns, watching for any sign the Dominion suspected our intentions. Nathan oversaw the modified strike drones, small unmanned vessels equipped with weapons cobbled together from salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity. 16 drones, Nathan said, reviewing the plan one final time, each one insignificant alone, together striking from 16 different directions within the same fraction of a second. The shield recalculation system should not be able to adapt in time. "Should not," Grace repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Nothing is guaranteed," Nathan admitted, "but it is our best chance." I stood in the control room, watching 16 small points of light detach from a hidden position near an asteroid field, moving silently toward their target. My hands were steady, but my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Vec stood beside me, watching the same screen. "If this succeeds," Vec said quietly, "it will be reported. Command will investigate. They will begin to understand humanity differently than before." "Is that good or bad?" I asked. "That depends entirely on what humanity does next," Vec replied. The drones reached their target with perfect timing, 16 separate strikes converging within the same fraction of a second, exactly as calculated. For one terrifying moment, nothing happened, and I feared the entire plan had failed. Then the relay's shields flickered, overwhelmed by the distributed assault, unable to recalculate fast enough to counter threats arriving from every direction simultaneously. A cascade of explosions tore through the structure, and within seconds, the Dominion supply relay ceased to exist. The control room erupted into stunned celebration, quickly hushed by Ethan's urgent voice. "Movement detected," he said. Multiple Dominion vessels changing course, heading toward the relay's last known position. The celebration died as quickly as it had begun, replaced by tense silence as we watched Dominion ships converge on the wreckage, clearly confused, searching for an enemy they could not immediately identify. "They do not know it was us," Grace whispered. "They will investigate," Vec said, "and when they trace the technology used in the strike, they will realize humanity has adapted their own systems against them. This has never happened before." I felt a strange mixture of pride and fear settle over me. We had struck a real blow, however small, against a fleet capable of erasing entire sections of the moon. But we had also revealed something dangerous to an enemy that valued predictability above all else. Humanity was no longer predictable, and for the first time since the ships arrived, I began to believe that unpredictability might be exactly what we needed to survive. Over the following days, reports filtered in from other stations and hidden facilities scattered across Earth's remaining defense network. Similar strategies, born from similar desperation, had begun appearing elsewhere. Small strikes, clever traps, systems repurposed in ways the Dominion had never encountered before. It became clear that humanity, faced with annihilation, had begun doing what it always did in moments of crisis. Adapting faster than anyone expected, working together despite differences that had once seemed impossible to overcome, finding strength not in matching the enemy's power directly, but in refusing to fight the way the enemy expected. Vec watched these reports with an expression I had come to recognize as cautious hope, an expression I imagined had been rare among the Dominion for a very long time. "They expected quick surrender," Vec said one evening, standing beside me at the observation window, watching distant lights that marked both Dominion ships and the first signs of organized human resistance. "Instead, they have given humanity a common enemy, a reason to unite despite countless historical differences. This is a mistake they have never made before, because no species has ever responded this way." "What happens now?" I asked. Vec considered the question carefully before answering. "Now the Dominion escalates," Vec said. "They will not accept this loss quietly. They will apply greater pressure, believing greater force will finally achieve the surrender they originally demanded." I thought of Claire, safe for now in an underground shelter, and countless others like her across the planet, families waiting anxiously for news, uncertain whether the small victories reaching them through fragmented communication meant hope or simply a delay before greater destruction. "And if greater pressure does not work?" I asked quietly. Vec turned to look at me, something unreadable in those ancient, tired eyes. "Then the Dominion will have taught humanity exactly how to defeat them," Vec said, "piece by piece, mistake by mistake, without ever intending to do so." Outside the window, the Dominion fleet shifted formation, ships repositioning with cold, mechanical precision, preparing for whatever came next. And somewhere below, on a planet fighting for its very survival, humanity prepared as well, not with the same weapons, not with the same numbers, but with something the Dominion had clearly never accounted for: the willingness to keep adapting, no matter the cost, until the balance of power shifted entirely in a direction none of us could have predicted just 2 short weeks before. The escalation came exactly as Vec predicted, 3 days after the relay's destruction, and it came without warning. I was asleep in a small bunk near the workshop when Ethan's voice cut through the ship's speakers, sharp with urgency. "All hands to stations. Multiple Dominion vessels moving into attack formation above the eastern coastline. This is not a drill." I was on my feet before I finished processing the words, running through corridors filled with people moving in the same direction, faces tight with fear, but eyes steady with something else. Determination, maybe, or simple refusal to give in. The main screen in the control room showed a live feed pulled from what remained of Earth's orbital sensors. Dozens of Dominion ships descended toward a coastal city I recognized instantly. Millbrook, a place I had visited as a child, with its old harbor and quiet streets. "They are targeting infrastructure," Grace said, voice tight as she studied the feed. "Power grids, water systems, communication towers. Not people directly, not yet. They are trying to break us without mass destruction," Nathan said grimly. "Cripple the systems that let us function as a society. Make surrender feel like the only reasonable option." I watched, helpless, as beams of light struck key locations across the city, precise and merciless. Within minutes, entire districts went dark. Emergency broadcasts flickered and died. My hands curled into fists at my sides, useless against something happening so far below, so far beyond my reach. Vec stood beside me, expression unreadable, watching the same destruction unfold. "This is meant to demonstrate consequence," Vec said quietly. "For every action humanity takes against the Dominion, greater pressure will follow. They believe this will eventually force surrender." "And will it?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. Vec turned to look at me directly. "Based on everything I have observed since arriving here, I do not believe so. Humanity does not respond to pressure the way the Dominion expects." Vec was right. Within hours, reports began flooding in from across the planet, not of despair, but of resolve hardening into something unshakable. Communities without power organized relief efforts using whatever resources remained. Engineers worked around the clock to restore critical systems using backup technology nobody had touched in decades. People who had spent years arguing over politics, borders, and ideology suddenly found themselves working side by side, driven by a threat far greater than any disagreement that had once divided them. My sister Claire sent another message, this one steadier than the last. "The power is out here," she said, "but people are helping each other. Neighbors I have never spoken to before are sharing food, checking on the elderly, keeping each other calm. Whatever they were trying to do to us, Daniel, I think it is working against them instead." I felt something warm settle in my chest, despite the chaos surrounding us. A quiet pride in the resilience of people who refuse to be broken by fear alone. Meanwhile, aboard Meridian, our small resistance continued gathering intelligence, searching for the next opportunity to strike a meaningful blow. Vec's knowledge of Dominion command structure proved invaluable once again. "There is a vessel," Vec explained during a tense strategy session, called a coordination hub. "It manages targeting data and communication between all Dominion ships currently near your planet. Without it, individual vessels would be forced to operate independently, without centralized guidance." "How well defended is it?" Nathan asked. "Heavily," Vec admitted. "It is considered nearly impossible to approach directly. However, it possesses one particular vulnerability. It relies on a specific frequency to communicate with the wider fleet, a frequency that cannot be changed quickly without disrupting coordination across the entire invasion force." Ethan's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. "If we can disrupt that frequency at exactly the right moment, even briefly, we could cause chaos throughout their entire fleet, ships acting without orders, confusion across their formations. And in that confusion," Grace added, "we strike the hub itself, removing centralized coordination entirely, at least temporarily." The plan was daring, more dangerous than anything we had attempted before, requiring precise timing and a level of coordination between our scattered resistance efforts that had never been tested at this scale. But desperation breeds courage, and courage breeds action, even when the odds remain uncertain. Word spread quietly through encrypted channels to other resistance groups scattered across Earth's remaining defense network. For the first time since the invasion began, fractured human factions, separated by distance, ideology, and old rivalries, agreed to work together toward a single, coordinated goal. I remember standing in the control room, watching dozens of small indicators light up across a hastily assembled map, each one representing a group of humans somewhere across the planet, preparing to play their part in a plan that could either turn the tide of the war or bring swift, catastrophic retaliation upon us all. Vec stood quietly nearby, watching the same map with something like wonder in those ancient eyes. "I have served the Dominion for longer than your entire recorded history," Vec said softly. "I have never witnessed anything like this. Complete strangers, divided by everything that should keep them apart, choosing unity in the face of annihilation. Maybe that is exactly why they misjudged us," I said. "They saw our differences and assumed weakness. They never accounted for what happens when those differences are set aside." The day of the operation arrived with a tension so thick it felt physical, pressing down on everyone aboard the station. Grace ran final calculations, while Ethan coordinated timing across every resistance cell involved. Nathan oversaw the modified equipment necessary to disrupt the coordination hub's communication frequency at precisely the right moment. I found myself standing beside Vec once more, watching the countdown tick toward 0. "Are you afraid?" I asked quietly. Vec considered the question carefully. "I have spent my entire existence following orders I no longer believe in. Fear feels different now than it once did. It feels like something worth facing, rather than something to simply obey." The countdown reached 0. Across the planet, dozens of hidden transmitters activated simultaneously, flooding the specific frequency the Dominion relied upon with carefully crafted interference, disrupting communication throughout their entire fleet at once. Confusion rippled visibly across their formations, ships hesitating, uncertain how to proceed without centralized guidance. In that critical window, our modified strike drones, faster and more numerous than the ones used against the supply relay, converged on the coordination hub itself. This time, the Dominion's defenses reacted quickly, energy weapons cutting down drone after drone before they could reach their target. My heart sank as I watched half our strike force destroyed within seconds. "They are adapting faster than expected," Grace said, voice tight with concern. "Redirect the remaining drones," Nathan ordered. "Target the hub's primary defense array directly. If we cannot destroy the hub itself, we cripple its ability to protect against further attacks." The remaining drones altered course, sacrificing their original target for a more achievable goal. Explosions bloomed silently across the void, as the defense array took heavy damage, weakening the hub's protective capabilities significantly, though not eliminating it entirely. It was not the complete victory we had hoped for, but it was enough. With the coordination hub severely weakened and communication across the fleet disrupted for several crucial hours, Dominion ships operated independently, uncertain, vulnerable in ways they had never experienced before. Resistance cells across the planet used that window of confusion to strike smaller, opportunistic targets, weakening the invasion force piece by piece, each victory small individually, but significant when combined together. By the time Dominion communication systems fully recovered, the invasion force had suffered losses far greater than anything they had anticipated when the campaign began. More importantly, something had shifted within their own command structure, something Vec picked up through fragments of intercepted communication in the following days. "There is disagreement," Vec explained, studying the intercepted data carefully. "Some among Dominion leadership question whether this campaign was properly evaluated before it began. Others argue that continuing will require resources far beyond what was originally allocated." "They are having doubts," Ethan said, a note of cautious hope in his voice. "Doubt within a rigid command structure is dangerous," Vec said. "It suggests cracks forming in a system that has never before questioned its own decisions." I thought about the Dominion ship that had first appeared above Earth, massive, confident, certain of easy victory. I thought about the moon, scarred permanently by a single demonstration of overwhelming power. And I thought about how, piece by piece, mistake by mistake, that same overwhelming power was beginning to crumble under pressure it had never expected to face. Vec turned to me, expression solemn, but tinged with something that looked almost like hope. "They came here believing your species, too unstable to be trusted with the stars. Vec said quietly. I am beginning to believe they were right about one thing, Daniel. Humanity is unpredictable. But not because you are broken, because you refuse to break. Outside the window, damaged Dominion ships limped slowly back toward the main fleet, a visible sign that the Empire believed unstoppable had just suffered wounds it would remember for a very long time. And somewhere far below, on a planet still fighting for survival, humanity continued adapting, continued uniting, continued proving, strike by strike, that the very qualities the Dominion had judged as weakness were quickly becoming the foundation of their downfall. 3 weeks after the coordination hub was crippled, everything changed. I stood in the control room aboard Meridian, watching a live feed that would have seemed impossible on the day those first alien ships appeared above Earth. Instead of hiding, instead of scattering to avoid detection, human vessels, small but numerous, newly built using technology reverse-engineered from captured Dominion systems, moved in organized formation toward a weakened section of the invasion fleet. We were no longer simply surviving. We were attacking. Formation holding steady, Ethan reported, monitoring communication between the scattered groups, now operating as something resembling an actual coalition fleet, targeting solutions locked on 3 damaged Dominion cruisers, still recovering from the coordination hub incident. Grace stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen with an intensity that had replaced the fear I remembered from those early days. 3 weeks ago, we were hiding in the dark, hoping they would not notice us, she said. Now we are hunting them. I thought about how strange that transformation felt, and how quickly it had happened. Humanity, faced with annihilation, had not simply endured. We had adapted, learned, built, and organized faster than I ever believed possible. Vec stood nearby, watching the same feed with quiet fascination. Over the past weeks, Vec had become less an outsider among us, and more a trusted advisor, someone whose insight into Dominion thinking had repeatedly given us the edge we needed. They did not expect this, Vec said. A species recovering this quickly from near-total defeat, developing offensive capability within weeks, rather than years. This has never happened in recorded Dominion history. What happens when they realize their mistake was made months ago, not days ago? I asked. Vec considered the question carefully. Then they will understand that the war they believed they were winning was actually lost the moment they underestimated you. The battle unfolded exactly as planned. Coordinated strikes from multiple angles overwhelmed the damaged cruiser's weakened defenses. Technology adapted from captured Dominion systems turned against the very empire that built it. Within 20 minutes, all 3 cruisers were destroyed or forced into retreat, a victory that would have seemed impossible just a month earlier. But the true significance of that battle became clear only later, when Ethan intercepted a fragment of encrypted Dominion communication that sent a chill through the entire control room. "This is bigger than us," Ethan said slowly, translating the message with Vec's careful assistance. "Other species within Dominion territory are reacting to what is happening here. Word of humanity's resistance has spread beyond Earth's solar system." Vec's expression shifted into something I had never seen before, cautious excitement mixed with old, deep weariness. "The Dominion rules through fear," Vec explained. "Fear that resistance is impossible, that submission is the only rational choice. Every species within their territory has been taught this lesson through countless examples of overwhelming force used against those who dared to resist." "And now?" Grace asked. "Now they are witnessing an exception," Vec said. "A species that resisted, adapted, and began winning. This threatens something far more valuable to the Dominion than territory or resources. It threatens the fear that holds their entire empire together." Over the following days, our intelligence gathering revealed something remarkable. Small signals, careful and coded, began reaching Earth's resistance network from unexpected sources. Other species scattered across Dominion-controlled space, some offering information, others offering quiet support, none willing to openly declare allegiance yet, but all watching humanity's resistance with growing interest. One particular signal stood out among the rest, originating from a species VEC, identified as the Corvain Assembly, a group that had lived under Dominion control for generations, their homeworld heavily restricted, their technology carefully limited to prevent any possibility of rebellion. The message was brief, translated carefully by Vec and Ethan working together long into the night. "We have watched your resistance with great interest. The Dominion claims strength through order and control. You have shown us something different. If given the opportunity, some among us would be willing to offer aid, however limited, in exchange for proof that resistance against the Dominion is truly possible." The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. "They want to see if we can actually win," Nathan said quietly, "before they risk everything to help us." "That is understandable," Vec said. "For those living under Dominion control, hope has been a dangerous thing to hold on to. Many have learned through painful experience that resistance often ends in destruction rather than victory." I thought about the countless worlds we knew nothing about, entire civilizations living under the same fear that had gripped Earth just weeks earlier, watching our small, desperate resistance with cautious, fragile hope. "Then we need to make sure they see something worth believing in," I said. The following weeks brought rapid change, both in the war above Earth and within the Dominion itself. Reports gathered through Vec's careful monitoring of intercepted communication revealed growing dissent among Dominion leadership. What had begun as a quick campaign intended to demonstrate strength and secure easy surrender had transformed into a costly, drawn-out conflict, draining resources far beyond what had originally been allocated. "There is a faction within Dominion Command," Vec explained during one particularly tense briefing, arguing that continued engagement with Earth threatens stability elsewhere within their territory. Resources diverted here weaken defenses and control efforts across other regions, particularly regions where discontent has quietly simmered for generations. "They are spread too thin," Grace said, understanding immediately. "Fighting us is costing them control everywhere else." "Precisely," Vec confirmed. "And every day this conflict continues without clear victory. That cost grows higher, while the fear that once held their empire together weakens further. It was during this period that our resistance achieved what would later be remembered as one of the most significant victories of the entire conflict. Intelligence gathered from multiple sources, including cautious cooperation with elements of the Corvain Assembly, revealed the location of a Dominion shipyard responsible for constructing and repairing much of the invasion fleet currently engaged above Earth. Destroying it would cripple the Dominion's ability to sustain their campaign indefinitely. The operation required coordination on a scale we had never attempted before, human resistance cells working alongside cautious, indirect support from Corvain operatives familiar with Dominion shipyard security systems. Vec's knowledge proved invaluable once again, providing critical details about internal defense protocols that would have otherwise remained unknown to us. I remember the tension in the control room as the operation began, every screen filled with data streams tracking multiple strike teams moving into position across a battlefield that now stretched far beyond Earth's immediate vicinity. "This is the largest coordinated strike we have attempted," Nathan said, voice tight with concentration as he monitored the unfolding operation. "If this fails, we lose most of our remaining offensive capability in a single engagement." "And if it succeeds?" Grace asked. "If it succeeds," Vec said quietly, "the Dominion loses their ability to sustain this war indefinitely. They will be forced to choose between continuing at unsustainable cost or withdrawing entirely." The battle that followed remains, even now, one of the most intense experiences of my life. Strike teams moved through carefully mapped vulnerabilities in the shipyard's defenses, Corvain intelligence providing critical timing information that allowed human forces to bypass security systems that would have otherwise proven impossible to overcome. Explosions rippled across the massive structure as critical systems were destroyed one by one, construction bays, repair facilities, weapon storage areas, each strike calculated to maximize long-term damage while minimizing unnecessary risk to our own forces. I watched, breath held, as the shipyard's central reactor core, the heart of the entire facility, took a final, decisive strike from a coordinated assault involving both human and Corvain forces working together for the first time in open cooperation. The resulting explosion was visible even from Meridian's distant position, a bright flash that marked the end of one of the Dominion's most valuable military assets. The control room erupted into celebration, quickly tempered by Ethan's urgent voice cutting through the noise. Dominion command channels are in chaos, he reported, translating rapid, panicked communication with Vec's assistance. They are recalling ships from multiple fronts, redirecting resources, attempting damage control across their entire command structure. Vec stood very still, watching the data scroll across the screen with an expression I had never seen before, something between vindication and profound sorrow. "This will force a decision," Vec said quietly. "Dominion leadership can no longer treat this conflict as a simple demonstration of power. They must now decide whether continuing this campaign is worth the cost it has already extracted and the cost it will continue to extract if it persists." "What do you think they will decide?" I asked. Vec turned to look at me, ancient eyes reflecting something that might have been hope, carefully guarded after generations of disappointment. "I believe," Vec said slowly, "that for the first time since this campaign began, some among Dominion leadership are beginning to understand that they may have already lost, regardless of what happens next. Not through a single decisive battle, but through countless small decisions that gradually revealed a truth they never anticipated. Humanity was never the unstable threat they believed you to be. You were simply a threat to their belief that overwhelming force could solve every problem they encountered." Outside the window, the light from the destroyed shipyard slowly faded into the darkness of space, a visible reminder of how far we had come since those terrifying first days when a single alien ship appeared silently above our world, demanding surrender we refused to give. And somewhere across Dominion-controlled space, word continued spreading, quietly, carefully, among species who had lived too long under the shadow of fear, watching a small, stubborn world called Earth prove that resistance, however impossible it once seemed, might finally be within reach. The final message from Dominion Command arrived exactly 2 months after the first ship appeared above Earth, though it felt like an entirely different lifetime had passed since then. I stood in the control room aboard Meridian, now barely recognizable as the quiet research station it had once been, transformed instead into the beating heart of humanity's coordinated resistance. Screens surrounded me, tracking fleet movements, communication patterns, and the countless small victories that had accumulated into something none of us could have imagined during those first terrifying days. Ethan's voice cut through the tense silence. "Incoming transmission. Dominion Command Authority, direct channel, unencrypted." The room fell utterly silent. Vec stepped forward immediately, expression unreadable, studying the incoming data with an intensity that told me this moment mattered more than any battle we had fought so far. "Play it," Grace said quietly. The transmission began, a voice different from the cold, confident tone that had first demanded our surrender, this one carrying something unmistakable beneath its careful, measured words: uncertainty. "To the people of Earth," the voice said, "this is Dominion High Command. We acknowledge that our initial assessment of your species was incomplete." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly silenced as the message continued. "Continued engagement in this conflict has proven costlier than anticipated, both in military resources and broader stability across Dominion territory. We are prepared to discuss terms for immediate cessation of hostilities." Grace turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. "They are asking for peace," she whispered. "Not surrender, peace." Vec remained silent for a long moment, studying the message with careful attention before finally speaking. "This is not merely tactical retreat," Vec said. "This is an admission that continuing this war threatens something Dominion leadership values more than victory here: their own stability." I thought about everything Vec had explained to us over the past 2 months, how the Dominion maintained control not simply through overwhelming force, but through the fear that resistance was always doomed to fail. That fear had been the true foundation of their empire, far more valuable than any single fleet or shipyard, and we had broken it. "What do we do?" Nathan asked, looking toward Grace and me, though I knew the decision extended far beyond just the people standing in that room. This decision belonged to all of humanity, scattered across a planet that had spent 2 months learning what it truly meant to fight for survival together. Within hours, representatives from Earth's remaining governments, now united in ways that would have seemed impossible before the invasion began, gathered for an emergency summit broadcast to the entire planet. I watched from Meridian, alongside Grace, Ethan, Nathan, and Vec, as leaders who had once argued bitterly over borders and ideology now stood together, discussing terms with an alien empire that had arrived intending to crush them entirely. The negotiations that followed stretched across several tense days, conducted carefully through Vec's invaluable understanding of Dominion protocol and psychology. Earth's representatives demanded not simple cessation of hostilities, but genuine acknowledgement of the same principle the Dominion had denied from the very beginning, that humanity, whatever its flaws, whatever its chaotic and unpredictable nature, possessed the right to determine its own future among the stars. Vec proved essential throughout, translating not just words, but meaning, helping Earth's negotiators understand exactly which concessions carried real weight within Dominion political structure, and which were simply attempts to preserve appearances while conceding little of actual substance. "They fear what happens next if word spreads that Earth successfully resisted," Vec explained during a private briefing with Earth's lead negotiator, a calm, steady woman named Claire Doyle, who had somehow emerged as one of the most respected voices among humanity's newly unified leadership. Already, other species within their territory have grown bold, questioning authority that once seemed absolute. If the Dominion appears weak in these negotiations, that questioning will only intensify. "Then we use that fear carefully," Claire Doyle replied. "Not to humiliate them, but to ensure this never happens again, to us or to anyone else living under their control." I found myself deeply moved watching those negotiations unfold, understanding for the first time the true scale of what our small, desperate resistance had ultimately achieved. This was no longer simply about Earth's survival. It had become something larger, a spark that threatened to ignite change across territories the Dominion had controlled for longer than human civilization had existed. The final agreement, announced 2 weeks later, marked the official end of hostilities. The Dominion withdrew entirely from Earth's solar system, formally recognizing humanity's sovereignty and right to self-determination. Reparations were negotiated for the damage caused during the invasion, resources and technology shared in exchange for guarantees that Earth would not pursue immediate retaliation against a weakened Dominion presence elsewhere. But the true consequences of the war extended far beyond that single agreement. Within months, reports began reaching us through careful, cautious channels established with the Corvain Assembly and other species who had quietly supported humanity's resistance. Dominion authority, once considered absolute and unquestionable, had begun fracturing rapidly across multiple fronts. Populations who had lived for generations under strict, fear-based control watched Earth's successful resistance and found courage they had never before believed possible. Small rebellions, cautious at first, began appearing across Dominion territory, inspired directly by humanity's example. The Dominion, already weakened by the costly, drawn-out conflict at Earth, found itself increasingly unable to respond effectively to challenges arising simultaneously across multiple regions of their vast empire. Vec remained with us throughout this period, choosing to stay on Earth rather than return to a fractured empire that no longer resembled the rigid, controlled society Vec had once served. "I came here believing I was abandoning everything I once knew," Vec said one evening, standing beside me on an observation platform now overlooking a peaceful Earth, stars visible clearly for the first time since the invasion began. "I did not realize I was witnessing the beginning of something far greater than myself." Do you regret it? I asked, leaving everything behind. Vec considered the question carefully, something that had become a familiar habit over the months we had spent working closely together. I regret the suffering that occurred before understanding was reached, Vec said quietly. But I do not regret choosing conscience over blind obedience. If given the same choice again, I would make it exactly the same way. I thought about everything that had happened since that first terrifying night, when silence woke me instead of alarms, when a massive alien ship appeared silently above our world, demanding surrender we had refused to give. The Dominion had arrived believing humanity unstable, dangerous, unfit to expand beyond our own small corner of space. They had sought to demonstrate overwhelming power, expecting quick, easy submission from a species they viewed as inferior and disorganized. Instead, they had triggered something they never anticipated, resistance that grew stronger under pressure rather than weaker, unity forged from countless differences that had once seemed impossible to overcome, adaptation faster and more creative than any species they had previously encountered. And ultimately, an example so powerful it began unraveling the very foundation of fear that had held their empire together for generations. Standing there beside Vec, watching Earth slowly rebuild from the devastation of war, I understood something with absolute clarity that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The Dominion had come to crush humanity, to prevent us from ever becoming a threat to the established order they had maintained across countless worlds. Instead, through their own arrogance and misunderstanding, they had given humanity exactly what we needed to become something far greater than they ever imagined possible. They gave us unity, when we had been divided for so long by borders and disagreements that seemed impossible to overcome. They gave us purpose, forcing us to adapt and innovate faster than we ever believed ourselves capable of achieving. And most importantly, they gave us an example that spread far beyond our own small world, inspiring countless other species to question authority they had once believed absolute and unchallengeable. In their desperate attempt to secure their own future by crushing ours, the Dominion had instead destroyed the very foundation their future depended upon, the fear that resistance was always futile, the belief that overwhelming force could solve every challenge they encountered. Months later, as Earth continued rebuilding, forging new alliances with species who had once lived in fear of Dominion authority, I received word that the Dominion itself had fractured into several smaller factions, each struggling to maintain control over territories that had once submitted without question. The empire that had arrived above Earth with such overwhelming confidence, certain of quick and easy victory, now found itself fighting simply to survive the consequences of its own critical misjudgment. I stood once more on that same observation platform, watching stars that no longer represented distant threat, but instead symbolized possibility, opportunity, and a future humanity would now shape according to our own choices, rather than someone else's demands. Grace joined me quietly, followed shortly by Ethan and Nathan, each carrying the weight of everything we had experienced together over those intense, transformative months. "Do you think this is truly over?" Grace asked, studying the peaceful sky above us. I considered the question carefully before answering, echoing perhaps unconsciously the same thoughtful manner Vec had demonstrated so often throughout our time together. "I think this particular chapter is over," I said, "but I believe humanity has learned something invaluable through everything we endured. We learned that our differences, the very things others might view as weakness or instability, can become our greatest strength when we choose unity over division." Vec stepped forward to join us, standing quietly among humans who had once been strangers, now bound together by shared struggle and hard-won victory. "The Dominion believed stability required rigid control," Vec said softly. "They measured every species against that single, narrow standard, punishing those who failed to conform. In doing so, they built an empire founded entirely on fear, never realizing how fragile such a foundation truly was." "And now?" Nathan asked. "Now," Vec said, "they have learned, through painful experience, that true strength does not come from control or fear. It comes from adaptability, from unity forged voluntarily rather than demanded through threat, and from the courage to keep changing, keep growing, no matter how impossible the odds might initially appear. I looked out at Earth, scarred but healing, its people forever changed by the trial they had endured together. I thought about the countless worlds scattered across the stars, watching our small, unlikely victory with newfound hope and courage. The Dominion had arrived intending to secure their future by eliminating a threat they believed dangerous and unpredictable. Instead, through their own overwhelming arrogance, they had unknowingly created the very future they feared most, a united, adaptable, unstoppable humanity, standing firmly among the stars, no longer willing to accept anyone else's judgment of what we were capable of achieving. They came to crush us. Instead, they destroyed their own future, and without ever intending to, helped build ours. And as I stood there watching the sunrise break gently across a planet that had somehow survived against impossible odds, I understood that this was not truly an ending at all. It was simply the beginning of everything humanity was destined to become.